Today we're cooking with food storage. Joining me today is Lisa Harkness and Leslie Probert. They're authors and lecturers on emergency preparedness and food storage. Welcome. Well, first of all, Lisa, why should we learn to cook with our food storage?
Well, we store a year's supply of food in the event of a natural or economic emergency. And in those type of emergencies, it would be a great comfort to already know how to use your food storage. It would help to relieve a lot of stress. So learning how to cook with your food storage now is a really important part of being prepared.
What about the health benefits, Leslie?
In addressing the health concerns of our day, these foods are at the top of the list of foods recommended for us to eat. These high-fiber foods will be upsetting to the digestive system if you suddenly begin to eat them, so it's important to start incorporating them into your diet now.
Now, today we're going to take a look at a lot of recipes that are very tasty and good for our families. First of all, where did you come up with these recipes? I'm assuming that you've taste tested all of them for us, but where did you come up with these recipes?
We started by looking at our own recipes for soups and stews and casseroles, and then with a little creativity and some practice, we learned to substitute stored foods for any fresh foods in the recipe. There are some emergencies when you would not be able to find fresh foods, and if you're depending on cheese, sour cream, or a ham hock to get your basic food storage to taste good, you're in trouble.
Speaking of that, we had a show on cheese making, and we had a lot of people interested in that. They were so excited, went out and made the cheese. We're going to make some recipes today, too, to get people engaged and interested. But, Lisa, how long should we store our food storage?
Well, that depends on the particular type of food, but there's one thing to keep in mind. Food storage will not last forever. It represents a financial investment once you have all this food stored. So you don't want to let it sit too long. You actually are going to have to get into it and use it, which is called rotating, using it and replenishing it.
All right, tell us about rotation then.
Well, we wanted to find a whole month's worth of bean recipes and a month's worth of good tasting canned meat recipes, and we were able to be successful with that. Once you have a pool of good tasting recipes, if you will eat food storage meals 2 days out of the week, you can have a whole year's supply rotated in just 3.5 years.
Oh, that's a wonderful idea.
That's well within or close to the shelf life of most foods, and your food storage will be fresher, and you'll know how to use what you've stored.
Some of us have learned that when we buy our food storage, if they're in cans or in bottles, it's really essential for us to date when we purchase them. What type of information is important, Lisa, in that dating?
Yeah, this is really important, and it's real simple. All you need to do is keep a permanent marker in the same place where you store your food. And then every time you bring home a new package of food or a can of food, just date it. And that lets you know which foods you need to get through first and which foods you need to rotate through at first.
Talking about serving food to our families, I'm not sure if I said to my family, kids, it's food storage night. They'd be excited necessarily to join us for dinner on that one. How should we best introduce food storage? If we do it twice a week, we understand now we can rotate throughout a whole year, but how should we kind of bring it into our regular family planning and meals?
Well, actually, if you're eating rice, oatmeal, refried beans, burritos, or macaroni, you're already eating food storage. So it's important to try some recipes, decide which ones you like. If you have a family, let it be a family decision. Decide how often you would have a recipe in a month, and then you can plan to acquire the things needed in that recipe. Work for a whole month's worth of recipes, and then you multiply those by 12 to plan for a whole year. Planning this way, you don't waste any food, and you enjoy rotating what you've stored. Don't be surprised if some of your food storage recipes actually become your family favorites.
That's great to know. One of the items I always think about before I make dinner at home is how much time this dinner will take. What have you thought about in these recipes that you're introducing us today? How complex are they?
Not very complex at all. In fact, most food storage recipes are really easy to assemble. There's no dicing, there's no chopping, there's no sauteing. You just assemble them together, and then most recipes take anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes to cook, which is really the same amount of time we plan on when we cook a normal type of meal.
Wonderful. Well, we've got some great things on the table today. We're going to introduce Mexicali bean casserole.
Mexicali bean and rice salad.
All right, introduce us to it.
So we start with 6 cups of cooked and cooled rice, and we're going to add 1 3/4 cups each of pinto beans, kidney beans, and black beans.
Now, these could be out of the canned beans that we store in the food storage, is that right? Or where else would we
You can store canned beans in your food storage. These are already soaked and cooked, and so you would store 2.5 times the dried amount of beans if you're storing canned beans.
If you store dry beans, should you have reconstituted them the night before or added water to them?
Yes. Dried beans need to be sorted. You're looking for rocks. You'll need to rinse them, and they need to be soaked in 3 times the water to soften them before they're cooked. So you can soak them overnight. In the morning, you bring them to a boil, add a little oil to the pan to avoid having them foam and bubble over, and then you'll lower the heat to let them simmer covered for about 1 to 1.5 hours. You can do a quick soak with beans. Again, you would sort them, rinse them, and soak them in 3 times the water. You will bring the water to a boil for 2 minutes, let them stand for an hour to soften, and then cook them for an hour to an hour and a half. Once you get beans cooked, you drain them. This reduces problems with gas if you throw away the soaking and cooking liquid, and then you can put them in the fridge so they're all ready for a meal at night. Beans that are soaked quickly are not as soft, and they will also produce the most gas.
All right. Well, we want to avoid that. Let's go back to our recipe, though, with this Mexicali. We've introduced the beans and the rice. And what would be next?
Okay. We are going to add a can of corn.
And all of this is being your food storage.
This is made with only stored food. We have a can of diced green chilies.
That would be definitely a part of my long-term food storage plans, the green chilies.
And here we will be adding 1/4 cup of dried green pepper, and I've already hydrated some green and red pepper here. That needs to be hydrated in twice the water for about 30 minutes, and then you drain the water and add it to the salad. So that's all set to go. That's been hydrated and all ready to add.
Also on the green chilies, be careful as you purchase the cans because they do come in mild, medium, and depending on the age of your children, you might want to get the appropriate seasoning there. But already it's smelling terrific.
That's right.
And it's taken us about a minute so far to put those together.
Now I have a dressing here made with olive oil, cider vinegar, a little bit of cumin, and chili powder, and some garlic salt and hot pepper sauce. And I will just pour this.
And we'll have that recipe available for those too on our website. I'll
and then
that
we'll
while
just
you're mixing it together.
Toss this all
wonderful.
together.
It's a little bit sweet. That cider vinegar really helps.
So this makes a very colorful
I also want to
dish.
kind of hold up these freeze-dried green peppers because they really show nicely. And and they're very lightweight. They're almost like paper when you pick them up, a small bowl that we've got here of the green pepper.
Now you can serve this salad immediately or you can chill it.
So by mixing all the ingredients together with a little bit of the cider vinegar and cumin salad dressing, you've got your salad right there.
Yes,
Could I
all
taste
set
it?
to go.
That'd be okay?
Yes, let me give you a little
And this serving size right here is for a family maybe of 8?
Yeah, 6 to 8 people.
Wonderful. Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. This has a little hint of flavoring from the green chili and great vinegar. All right, let's move on to our next recipe. All right, we're back. Now we're going to take a look at how to make fettuccine carbonara.
That's right.
Carbonara, however you want to pronounce it. Let's go.
This will be a family favorite. It's so quick and easy. You start with enough pasta, cooked pasta, for about 4 to 6 people. And you make the sauce by putting...
This is from food storage.
That's right, just out of your food storage. Then water, a cup of water, to which you add a 1/2 cup of white sauce mix, and you just kind of whisk that together.
And is there a recipe then for the white sauce mix?
There is. It's real easy. All it is equal parts of white flour, instant dry milk, and powdered butter. You add a little chicken bouillon, the granules, and then a little salt. And this is a great thing to have on hand because it makes a great base for white, like any white sauce or any... Exactly. Creamy soup base. I even use it as a substitute for cream of mushroom or cream of chicken soup in casseroles.
Wonderful.
So it's a great
We'll have that
thing.
recipe on our website as well. That's for the white sauce.
That's right. So then you add a 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese, and you just whisk that around till it's smooth. Get it to a boil, and it'll thicken up. And then you pour it over your pasta, toss it, And then once you've done that, you'll want to add about a half a bottle of bacon.
Oh,
bacon
a lot
pieces.
of the bacon bits.
Yeah,
Now,
it makes
do
it
you
really
store bacon bits in those small containers like that, or do you have a larger container?
No, just like this. And in fact, most recipes that we've found really only take about a half a bottle of this. This will store for 3 years, packaged this way. It's quite inexpensive. It's cheaper than most canned meats. And you can just store it just like this. And you can also store a bacon-flavored TBP if you like that flavor.
All right.
But if you don't, there's the real.
So
this is the
half
real
container,
stuff.
That's what adds that strong flavor. Now, this is out of our food storage as well. Parmesan cheese. You store
That's
that
right.
in your food storage as well.
So you'll just kind of put some on a plate like this, and we'll let you try it, Rebecca.
That looks great.
It's not very much, but
This would only take about 10 minutes to prepare.
oh
at the
yeah,
most.
yeah.
Incredibly.
It's just making the
wonderful.
pasta, taking a minute or two for the sauce to boil, and there you have it. It's done. Teenagers actually like to do this or make this after school. It's really
Oh,
easy.
this is very, very good. The bacon adds a nice flavor.
Doesn't it,
How
though?
long does pasta store?
Oh, at least 8 years.
I know that I've had to change mine from the original plastic containers into other Ziploc bags because the plastic wrapping just broke. So what do you store your pasta in?
I just have a number 10 cans.
All right, well, thank you for this, and we'll move on to our next recipe. All right, now we're going to look at a recipe that uses some of the alternative grains like barley. This is called beef barley stew.
And we're going to begin with a can of roast beef chunks. I used to think that this would be too expensive to put in food storage until I discovered that a 12-ounce can of beef, chicken, or turkey chunks would make a fabulous recipe that feeds 4 to 6 people. On sale, one of these cans is about $2.50 or less. So that's the cost really of a pound of good quality hamburger.
Wonderful. And these store for a long time.
Yes, they do. And all except for tuna. You want to use tuna within 2 years, but all the other canned meats store very well.
Wonderful.
So we'll add this to the recipe. Now you can substitute canned meats pound for pound for any part of the dried beans that you store. So we're going to add to 7 cups of water some dried carrots. We've got some dried minced
Now,
onions.
these look freeze-dried. Are they freeze-dried?
No, they're all dried.
Okay.
And notice that you don't hydrate these ahead of time. That was some dried celery. We've got some dried green pepper. You put them in the recipe with the hydrating liquid, and they'll hydrate and cook at the same time. So that saves a lot
Now,
of time.
in front of the pot right now, we do have some cans here to show some of them. Oh, pardon me, right over here. We have mixed peppers, and this is a nice-sized can. This
Yes.
would last you, what, 6 months of rotation or 4 months, depending on how much you like mixed peppers?
It could last up to a year even, but when you're buying dried, particularly green peppers and celery, it's good to ask for that size 2.5 can because it doesn't get too old by the time you use it. You use only about a tablespoon or 2 in any recipe.
And this is a 4-ounce can. Great, wonderful. So for a lot of our kind of added taste vegetables, things that just add seasoning, we get the smaller cans rather than the larger.
We
Wonderful.
find these add important flavor to food storage recipes. So I'm going to add some dried red and
where
green
would
pepper.
by the way, as you keep moving on with the recipe, where would I find these, by the way? Where would I?
You can, of course, dry any of your dried vegetables if you have the inclination and the time, or you can purchase them from a food storage supplier place in your area or over the internet.
Wonderful, thank you.
So I'm going to add some beef bouillon here, and I will bring this all to a boil for, I've got some spices here, some basil, some green pepper, and a bay leaf.
And what about the barley? Would that go in?
I'll bring this to a boil,
Okay.
and then I will add the barley.
Now, is the barley different from beans in that it does not need to be reconstituted?
Does not need to be reconstituted. It can, it cooks in about 45 minutes. It's a really great grain to have.
Kind of
in
like
food
long
storage.
grain rice that needs a little bit longer cooking, but you don't have to
The
reconstitute.
most common barley that you will find is pearled barley. It's had the hull milled away, and it tastes great in soups and stews. It's highly nutritious and adds some important variety to food storage meals.
And now you've boiled it
I'll
first,
bring
the
this-
vegetables and the meat, then you...
No, I'll just bring this to a boil, then I'll add the barley, and then I will cover this dish. So we'll just add this And I'll cover this dish and simmer it for 45 minutes to get the barley to be tender.
And once the barley expands with the 7 cups of water you have in there, I'm imagining you have a pretty healthy serving. How many people can actually
this will serve 6 to 8 people.
6 to 8 people.
So you have a sample there.
This is really pretty, very colorful. The carrots reconstituted nicely, and it seems extraordinarily healthy. Tell us about why this would be a nice meal to be able to serve either in an emergency situation or at home.
Well, the variety of vegetables in that dish make it very nutritious. Of course, the barley is nutritious, and canned meat makes it just taste great.
I'm going to tell you, this tastes so much better than what you would get in a canned prepared soup from the store. This is really something your kids will eat. It's very flavorful.
Canned meats are a comfort food. Most of us really love meat, and so we think it's important to store canned meats in food storage.
A wonderful example of the different type of grains that we can use in our recipes. Thank you. This is another great way to incorporate lentils in our recipes. This is bean and lentil rice pilaf.
That's
Show
right.
us how it's made.
This is really quick to make, and it's got a little bit of a kick to it, so it's a fun dish. You start with some water, to which you add...
And how much water was that?
That was about 2 1/4 cup.
Okay.
You add a 1/4 cup of lentils, dried lentils, about 2 tablespoons, I think, of olive oil, 2 teaspoons of some chicken bouillon, and some minced onion.
And we talked in our last recipe how long barley stores. How long does lentil store?
Oh, about you can say about 8 years or so too, about the same.
Wonderful. So all of these items from your food storage mixed together in the water.
So once you have this, then you're going to want to simmer it, boil it, and then you simmer it for 15 minutes covered.
Okay.
After that's done, then you'll want to add the rest of the ingredients, which is a can of corn. Or, this is actually kidney beans.
Okay.
A can of kidney beans, a can of corn. And then...
these are the small cans. These are
yeah, this is the regular
15
ounce size.
All right.
And then a cup of long grain rice. And then a cup of salsa.
Okay, and all of these are from food storage.
Just
and I
from
imagine
food storage.
if you wanted to use dehydrated corn, you could use that as well.
You could. You need to hydrate it beforehand. You'll stir this all together, bring it to a boil, and then cover it and simmer it for another 20 to 25 minutes. And this is the finished product.
How much salsa did you add?
A cup. A cup of salsa. So let's get some out here for you to taste.
Do you have any hints for those of us who might not have had experience cooking lentils and rice together? Is there some tips to keep in mind?
Well, lentils, like split peas and barley, take about 45 minutes to cook. Both lentils and rice adapt really well to all types of seasonings and flavorings, and they do really well in one-pot meals, kind of like this one that we've just done. They're really good for those.
And this is very flavorful. I've just taken a bite of it. It's wonderful, sweet, and the salsa does add that nice kick. To make sure that we keep salsa in our food storage.
Exactly.
Is that homemade, by the way, or did you buy that?
No, just bottled. Just from the store.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Let's go on to another one. Let's talk about food storage and wheat.
Well, the main way that you're going to use your wheat is by grinding it into flour. And once it's in flour, you can use it in the same normal ways that you're used to cooking with flour anyway, like making bread, cookies, muffins, and pancakes. Now, this loaf right here was made from 100% whole, hard white wheat. And the advantage of a white wheat would be that it produces a lighter colored product. You can see it's lighter.
It's risen very nicely,
It
too.
has.
I have a hard time getting my whole wheat bread to stand up and be counted. So
Yeah.
this is a hard, light
It's the hard white wheat, so it's flour that's been ground from the hard white wheat. And what you notice it does, so like I said, it makes a lighter colored product, but it also has a lighter taste and a lighter texture, too.
And where can we find that type of wheat?
Just about any food storage supplier. Some grocery stores even have it in bags. This recipe is awesome because it's really, really quick. Some people think that cooking or making bread takes too long. Well, there are recipes out nowadays that actually the bread rises right in the pan. You just turn on the oven and you cook it. There's no punching down and waiting for it to rise the second time. This is a real fast, easy way to make bread.
And on Sundays, I'd like to have that recipe as well. This is looking very good, and I'm surprised that it's all made out of 100% wheat.
These are cookies made with 100% whole wheat. In order to get wheat into your diet, this is a great place to start. Cookies actually made with 100% whole wheat, I've had some people say that they're much more flavorful and more tasty than cookies made with just white flour.
We'll go ahead and try that then. Oh, these are wonderful.
Aren't they great? Yeah.
You have a nice, rich, buttery taste as well.
Yeah.
We'll try to
These also have powdered eggs in them. So that's and you can't probably even taste the
Did you use
powdered eggs.
powdered butter in this recipe?
No, shortening.
Shortening, which is easier to store than
That's
food
right.
storage. We have some emails that came in. We've got Kara, who has written us, and let's take a look at this. She says, please get the word out about soft white wheat. It's easy to use, perfect for food storage, and tastier than white flour. What needs to be taught is how and where to substitute it in regular recipes for white flour. I know my family has been going nuts over it, and it's such a simple thing to incorporate in your everyday cooking.
Well, soft white wheat is actually not a good option for long-term food storage. While soft white wheat is very delicious, people also love the flavor of hard white wheat and hard red wheat. Soft wheat has a shelf life of about 8 years in comparison to 20-plus years for hard red and hard white wheat. Soft wheat is usually used in biscuits, pastries, and quick breads because it doesn't really have enough gluten to make good regular bread.
So if your family's hooked on it, though, you can have a mix of both the soft white and the hard white in your food storage?
Yes.
As long as you're aware of the rotation of the... We also have another email from Marga. She's from Utah. I have a lactose intolerance, and I'm very interested in finding out adequate sources of complete protein and calcium, including the nutrients necessary for calcium absorption, that I can include in my basic food storage instead of powdered milk. Also, there are people I know who are allergic to wheat and corn. In my experience, what is usually the grain focused on in food storage? What are some food storage recipes using grains other than wheat? Lots of questions there. Leslie.
Okay, let me talk about the lactose intolerance first. There is a country cream brand of powdered soy milk alternative that has been enriched with calcium and other important minerals, so that is a great substitute for milk.
And you can use that in all your recipes then, the soy?
You can, and you can store it like powdered milk. You could also store a good calcium supplement. When it comes to allergies to wheat, there are a variety of lesser-known grains that are available at food storage supply places. So this gives you lots of other options besides storing wheat.
Can you give me one or two of those alternative grains?
Yes, there's kamut, there's quinoa.
All right. Quinoa, I've heard a little bit about that. We'll have more of this information on our website as well. Let's talk about some of the alternative ways to cook. For example, if you don't have access to a stove. Lisa.
Yeah, we're going to show you two ways today. One uses charcoal and one uses propane. They're both very good fuels to store because both of them store indefinitely. There's no rotating that you have to do. However, there are some safety precautions that you have to take into mind. Before you store any fuel at all, you're going to need to check with your insurance policy and your city or homeowners association or whatever that is to make sure that you stick by all the guidelines and rules when it comes to storing fuel. Now, the Kingsford Charcoal Company assures us that storing charcoal in a garage is safe, but they do recommend that you put it into a waterproof container so it's kept away from moisture. Propane, however, must never, ever be stored inside. The propane canisters are actually designed to leak, and it doesn't evaporate into the air, it pools onto the ground. So if it's stored into the garage and it pools onto the ground, just the switch of a car engine is enough to ignite that propane, and you'd have a big problem.
Okay, so outside of the house?
Outside, always. You always use propane and store propane outside. Now, there is, in some locations, you can store those little 1-pound canisters. In some, you have to check with your location, but it is okay in some to store 2 of those 1 pounds inside a garage.
Wonderful. We can check with our local city officials for that. We also have something interesting here, and it's called an apple box reflector oven.
You can bake anything you would bake in a regular oven using the same time and the same temperature in this simple apple box reflector oven. Let me just show you.
An apple box lid that you've covered with tin foil.
This is a simple apple box. We've filled the holes for the handles of the box with cardboard, and then every bit of the inside must be covered with foil. Anything that is flammable will ignite. And for convenience sake, we have covered the outside of the box as
And I
well.
noticed that you also cut a window in, which I think my kids would absolutely love when we bring this. You bring this to Girls Camp, but camping or whatever emergency situation, you cut a rectangle about 5 inches by 10 and put, what is it that's heat resistant that we can look through? Looks like a plastic.
This is a double layer of oven bag, like you cook a turkey or a chicken.
An oven bag that's see-through. Wonderful. Okay.
And the foil is stuck with foil tape, which you can get at a hardware store, and it is heat resistant, so it will last for a very long time.
Different than duct tape, foil tape. That's heat resistant. Wonderful.
Now, this oven uses charcoal to cook, and so you will need to ignite the charcoal, and to do that, you need a charcoal chimney starter. The best ones have these holes up the side. They will draw air up inside efficiently to light the charcoal well. And by having this, then you don't have to store charcoal lighter fluid, which is highly flammable.
So this is
and
a
would be
cylinder
dangerous.
that keeps all of the charcoal close together so that it heats more quickly. We use that with our Dutch oven cooking as well.
Yes, it's just great. There's a rack about here inside that holds the charcoal, and so you can wad up 2 pieces of newspaper and put them in underneath and light those, and then you let the charcoal heat until the top charcoal have a white spot on them just the size of a dime. That's all that is
So they don't have to be
needed.
completely gray.
No, you'll spend the charcoal on the bottom quite a bit if you wait for the top ones to be entirely white. So here in our oven, we're going to pour this charcoal out once it's heated. Let me explain to you how this is set up. These are empty pop cans, and they're filled with rocks so they won't tip over. And the oven rack is made with an oblong cookie cooling rack. This allows you to cook with a variety of pan sizes in this oven.
And this can handle the temperatures that are reached with an oven. So it's a rectangular cookie rack sitting on 4 different soda pop cans for support.
So once the charcoal is heated, you pour it out.
And if you're out on the ground, then you spread out another piece of tin foil to be able to hold the charcoal.
This is heavy-duty foil that is put on the ground to reflect the heat up inside. You do need to operate this chimney charcoal starter on foil as well, or it will permanently blacken a driveway. I did have that happen. So once this is heated, you distribute this charcoal out evenly in the oven. You can regulate the temperature of this oven because each charcoal is 35 degrees.
So 10 of them is 350 degrees.
Yes,
We have
that's
just a
exactly
couple
right.
of minutes, but once you've got your heated charcoal on, your cooking sheet
We'll put this on, and you'll put whatever you're going to bake in here in the oven, and you'll put the box over and let it rest on a 1-inch rock. That allows enough oxygen inside for the charcoal to keep
tilt
burning.
the box back just a teeny bit, a 1-inch rock.
Yep, it's
Wonderful.
right here.
We have just one more minute, and you've got something else to show us.
This is called a hay box. It's cooking with retentive heat. You can do it either in a cardboard box filled with paper shreds or even in a cooler that's lined with wool blankets. And we've got something in here. The method of cooking with it is very easy. You just get a pot of food boiling, good and boiling with the lid on, and then you leave it in this cooler or your box 4 times the normal amount of time that you would normally take to cook a dish. So if your pot of beans takes an hour, actually, you leave it in for 4 hours.
Blankets insulate the heat.
That's
of the
right.
pot that was boiling.
That's right. And you can see here we've got some split pea stew. And it's been cooking for about 4 hours or so. There is a really important safety concern when cooking this way. You need to make sure that you have enough insulation in either your box or your cooler that can maintain a safe cooking temperature throughout the entire cooking time.
Well, we have just about 30 seconds to talk about the other box that you have next.
Yes, well, this is the same thing. So you can either do it this way. This is probably the least expensive way because it's just paper shreds and a box you can get at a dumpster. And then there's this way, which is a cooler. Everyone's got a cooler and some wool blankets, and you just make a well for the blankets inside, put your food in, cover it up, and then you wait 4 times the amount of time you would normally wait.
And we're going to have more information on these alternative ways of cooking on our website. So thank you, Lisa and Leslie, for joining us today. And thank you for watching. Be sure to join us next time on Living. Hearing some advice from the experts on what every emergency kit should contain. And we'll also get some tips on some of those special items you might not have ever thought of. To find out if you're prepared, stay tuned. Welcome to Living Essentials. I'm Rebecca Cressman, and today we're talking about building an emergency kit for all reasons. A disaster or an emergency could happen to all of us, and perhaps you're wondering how you could be better prepared. Joining me to help us out today is Marilyn Hoff of the Utah Department of Public Safety and Division of Emergency Services and Homeland Security. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today, Marilyn. Now, before we get to these things that we have here on the counter today, we first have a primary issue that everyone at first needs to be aware of when they're dealing with preparedness, and that is what?
Before you even think of preparing, you should sit down with your family and talk about a plan. And talk about that you're going to go through the house and gather up items to start your emergency kits, what the safe areas are, and where to meet, and you just literally plan.
Now, you have a family, and I'm imagining that not only is this your full-time job, but you probably have taken some steps to prepare your family. Tell us a little bit about what you've done along that line.
Well, I did sit with my family, and that was a disaster right there. They sat and listened to me, and we talked about preparing, and that they could help me gather these things through the household and put them in containers and just go from there step by step and make it a fun task.
Now, what about the specifics of the step-by-step process of creating emergency preparedness and creating the kits here? That we've got a lot of supplies here today, so are there steps that we should be taking to get ready?
What crossed my mind was, how do I begin? And so I figured I need to know what to put these items in. So I started with what containers I'm going to use. And so you can use suitcases, foot lockers, garbage cans, backpacks. You can go on and on and on. And so we started with the containers. And then we did the search through the house for items to put in these containers.
And you also mentioned 6 basics, and we'll go right to these items here. You mentioned that there's 6 basics that every home should have to be prepared. These are all kind of general categories, but let's talk about those.
Okay, the 6 basics you should have with your emergency kits is water, food, first aid, emergency tools, clothing and bedding, and then for the special needs, that's the elders and handicapped folks. And
would that be medication as well?
Medication.
Special needs? Now, how do I go about getting all this together? You talked about sitting down with your family and saying, okay, I need your help, but what's your advice about going about actually getting this all together?
Well, when we started going through the house, we gathered things through the house. We cleaned out the junk drawer, the closets, the garage, the basement, and put all these things together, and we placed them in the kits. Then we started with the bathroom. And then after the bathroom, we started with our clothing and bedding, and then our food and water. Simple.
So you start with when you say starting with the bathroom, you made sure you had those basic hygiene elements that you'll need, and then you moved on from there, ending with food. Well, let's start talking about toiletries then. What would be some of the basic toiletries we should be planning on having available?
Since you're starting in the bathroom, you need your toothbrush, toothpaste, towel, washcloth, lotions.
Okay, we've got some samples over here as well. Okay, so toothbrush, and this time you've actually used a travel size.
Yes, travel size.
And that's easier to pack, I'm assuming, a travel size. Okay.
Doesn't take a lot of room.
Toothpaste and mouthwash. What else?
Shampoos, lotions, first aid.
And that would be enough to get through 72 hours or whatever length of time that you want to prepare for. Now, you've got some towelettes. You've got some that are not normally kept in the closet but are actually packed away.
That's right.
And here's also some kind of disposable towelette.
That's right.
And so this would be a great awesomeness too. Now, should we go out and actually purchase these, or are you advising that we actually kind of take a look at what we've got already in our closets?
You gather things that you already have. You don't need to go out and spend money right now. Gather the things through the house and then start from there.
All right, so you can actually kind of do a scavenger hunt.
That's
where
right.
you can go through the house, and if we have young kids in the family, they'd actually probably appreciate it being a game. But go through the house, find those basic things that we already are using, just take a small percentage of those and stock those away. Well, wonderful. Now, you mentioned also after we've got our bathroom toiletries kind of taken care of, we move on to first aid. Now, you have a first aid kit here and some Band-Aids and other essentials. Talk to us about what basic first aid we should have with us.
Different size Band-Aids, ointments, burn kit, tweezers, things like that, gauze pads, and just things that will take care of a wound.
Okay, and a lot of this is what we use on an everyday basis.
That's right.
And making sure that if we use it sometime in the last few months, we've got to make sure it's in that first aid kit.
There's nothing in there to operate on anybody.
Oh, wonderful. Right next to what I think is wonderful that we've got laid out here today is we actually have the medication side by side with the first aid kit, because some of this is life-sustaining medication that we'd need to make sure we had with us in a disaster. How do you recommend actually packaging and storing the medication?
Well, what works for me is I have my medicine in the medicine cabinet, a week's worth in my purse, and a week's worth in my car kit. When it's gone out of the medicine cabinet, I'll start using the pills in my purse, and when it's half gone in my purse, I'll work on the car, and then that's how you can rotate your...
And that's very wise, because you're talking about 3 different locations where you have supply, both in your home and your car and on your purse. Let's also move down here as well. You have a sample of the type of clothing and bedding we should be keeping on supply.
Clothing, pack warm clothes in all your emergency kits. If a disaster occurs during the summer, you can cut the sleeves, cut the legs off till you can get to more clothing. So warm clothes, sweatshirts, sweatpants, socks is the ideal clothing.
You know, I'm thinking with a growing family, there might be a need to actually rotate this clothing, because it could be the pair of socks you put away 5 years ago only fits the dog and doesn't fit anyone anymore.
That's
But
right.
do you recommend actually kind of rotating the clothing that's in
Yes,
it?
let your emergency kits grow with the children.
And now, what about shoes? Do you recommend any type? Should we be looking at tennis shoes or some hard sole
Hard
shoes?
sole shoes.
And why is that?
In your kits. Because, for instance, I wear high heels at work, and so I do have a pair of hard sole shoes under my desk. And you also should put a pair of hard sole shoes underneath the head of your bed.
Okay, and those are more sturdy and help
Right.
you navigate. Now, what you've got a shiny blanket here that's
not
all
tin
folded
foil.
up. It's not tin foil,
No.
but actually we can get these at a lot of the emergency shelters. We're quite familiar with these, or first aid supply stores. Explain to us what this reflective paper is.
Well, this is, they call it Mylar blanket or emergency blanket, and your astronauts use this material also. And it looks like tin foil. It's not. It doesn't rip, and I mean, it will wear out, but it lasts forever. You can use it over and over and over. And you can go outside during the coldest winter day without a coat on and wrap yourself up in this blanket, and you will start sweating.
I'm looking at it, how condensed it is. It can fold down to about 3 inches by 5 inches versus the blanket that it's sitting on that is, you know, taking up a good foot by 2 space. Do you have an instance where actually this has been life-saving?
Yes. Yes. Matter of fact, we've had so many snowmobilers stranded in the mountains, and this one incident, a snowmobiler was stranded overnight, and he so happened to have one of these with him. Good on him. $1.99 kept him warm all night.
And that's what saved his life. Well, that's fab, because the temperatures drop so much at night. Now we've moved from some of these basics over into the food area, and you've got some samples here of different types of food. What do you advise?
We have your favorite, top ramen.
I had some yesterday.
Freeze-dried foods. We have liquids in cans, and we have MREs. That's Army food, and it's good.
And now, are there any recommendations? Obviously, you've got some that are freeze-dried, so they'll reconstitute in a much larger portion. But do you have advice that we should go through when we're deciding how much portions or whatever we should at least hold back for each family member?
Pack, and if you're going to store freeze-dried foods, pack for each member of the household for 72 hours. And the freeze-dried foods come in different varieties. You just add water, and it's very a lot of protein, and it's really good.
There's protein an item we should be thinking of packing as well. I also see that you've got some items like ramen noodles that last quite a while, but is there a recommended time in terms of rotating that so that we can make sure that when we go to eat the Vienna sausage or the fruit cocktail, it's still fresh?
Yes, everything you buy out of a store has an expiration date. So watch for your expiration dates and eat your foods, your emergency foods, every 6 months.
And again, you've got examples of carbohydrates as well as proteins, both of them which are energy foods and provide that. Now, you have a great display here on water, and some of these even in some small kind of Mylar bags. So talk to us about the importance of water and about how much we should be storing.
Okay, you should have 1 gallon per person per day. So figure out how much water you need to store for in case of an emergency. In my garage, I have 5-gallon water jugs, and I rotate every 6 months and put your date on it. And you can also store water in liter bottles. And liter bottles are great, not your plastic milk cartons with the handle, but liter bottles are great. And then the water packets are wonderful for smaller kits, for baby diaper bags, children's backpacks, mountain climbers, even in your desk drawer. And this water you do not need to rotate every 6 months. The shelf life to the packaged water pouches is 5 years.
That's a long time. And these are those Mylar sealed packages of water, individual servings. And I love the size because I think that brings up and underscores a point which you teach, which is portability. Because if we have a big 50-gallon drum of water outside and we need to evacuate, it's not very likely we can strap that to our back and head out. So look for portable water. Now, where would you advise getting containers? You talked about the 2-liter bottle for water. Is that one that you've reused from Soda Pop?
Yes, if that's your soft drinks, save your bottles, wash them out, rinse them, and then fill it up with regular tap water. You can, you have a choice if you want to put purifier in your water or not.
Now, one facet as well, with this 2-liter bottle, you actually have a harness attached to it, and I just pulled that bottle out. But is that for carrying purposes, so someone can sling that over their shoulder?
Yes, you can purchase these at the emergency stores also, and you just put it on your shoulder. And
a harness for water. Well, that's wonderful. There's another facet that the water storage I have in my home has stackable Mylar bags, and they're stackable in cardboard boxes, and they all come with spigots, which are wonderful for being able to pour the water. And so the spigot and this jug, which is a 5-gallon jug, where would you also find that type of a supply?
You can purchase these at any stores, hardware stores, and they're great for storing water, especially if you need to evacuate your home. You can pick these up, put a couple of them in your trunk.
Wonderful. And again, everything that's been here on the counter, we're going to have information on our website through Living Essentials. Now, we just took a look before at a lot of the different elements that would go into a disaster preparedness kit or an emergency preparedness kit, and those could go in any type of kit. But one of the primary kits that you teach, we all need to first assemble is the one for our home, for our personal use. And you've got some great tips here on ways that we can actually package and organize these items, and we're going to go into that. But first of all, it's hard to miss this big container we have, and I love it because of the wheels. That means that we can actually transport that with us very easy in the time of an emergency. And what do you use that size of a container for, Marilyn?
This holds all the needs for an emergency: food, water, clothing, tools, everything.
Is that for one person or for a family?
For one person.
All right, one person for 72 hours?
Yes.
Or? Okay, and we went ahead, and did you consciously make a choice to use one with wheels so that you'd be able to pull that back and forth?
Wheels are wonderful because the more you add to just a box, the heavier it will become. So wheels are nice when you can just grab it and wheel off.
Well, and also it being made out of rubber or plastic has some advantages over cardboard boxes. You've had problems with people storing things in cardboard boxes, and then the flood comes.
That's right.
The container is gone. Great tips here. Now, one of the specific tips that you advise has to do with a plastic bag, which you said that the Ziploc bags are your best friend when it comes to storage. But you advise putting clothing in a plastic bag and adding a surprise. And what would that be?
It's a dryer sheet. People make a face when they see a dryer sheet in with my blankets and clothing. And the reason for that is once you seal your Ziploc packages, a year later you open up the package, your clothing, and it won't smell dusty, mildew. The dryer sheet actually keeps it smelling fresh.
Oh, it's a wonderful tip to have. We also have, now you also have an interesting way of packaging some of your toiletries.
Yes, you can vacuum pack your items, and it takes all the air out. It looks like it's hard, but it preserves your soaps longer and keeps out the dust and bugs.
Yeah, and in a case of a flood or where there's rain, again. Now, I also wanted to bring something up here. You mentioned, again, Ziploc bags as a great container. I want to show this container, because when you talk about personal toiletries, there's nothing more personal than a commode. And this toilet seat, I don't know whether they can see it by me tipping it this way, but actually this has converted is it a 10-gallon drum?
It's a 5-gallon bucket, and you can get the seat that snap on the 5-gallon bucket at emergency stores, hardware stores.
And that converts it right into a commode. And inside, though, you have stacked your toilet paper and other hygiene areas, and it becomes a storage container for you as well. And it also has a handle, so you can also pick that up and run with it, so it makes it easier to carry with you. Now, this is also, you're using a large plastic bag to store these items, but individually, you've got them all packaged up individually?
Yes, I protect what I package, and so even your razor blades, just protect your items to keep from moisture and dust.
All right, now that's taking a look at the toiletries. You also have here, and I'll hold this one up too. This is a packaging of laminated papers, going back to lamination because it's plastic. What numbers and what information is key to have at a fingertip when there's a disaster?
In all your kits, no matter if they're small or large, you should have a list of your family names, other relatives, friends, and their addresses, phone numbers, and work numbers. And under their names, put how they belong to you.
Also, you've included a photo page. So is this for identification purposes in an emergency? And I'm also seeing on the back maybe some important certifications, marriage licenses, or birth certificates. So it's a wonderful way. This time you've used plastic sheaths, but they could be laminated as well if needed. Now, moving on to another essential is your light source, and you also have stored an energy source in a very neat way. What do we need to know about batteries?
Batteries you need to rotate every 6 months, just like water. And so you keep a calendar, you keep track of paydays, what bills to pay, holidays, birthdays. Mark on the calendar to take all your batteries out of all your kits and then use them in the house and then replace new batteries.
And you could also insert maybe an index card in here with the date of when you put the batteries in. Now, we've got 3 different types of flashlights here. Do you actually have a certain type of flashlight you recommend for storage?
Any flashlight, just protect it, keep it from getting wet, and so there's all types of lighting and flashlights out there.
Now, you also brought some samples from your personal storage of some of the special tools that we can include. You have a hand warmer, and this is very small little envelope, and how would this help us out?
You can use hand warmers for anything. It's not just for an emergency kit. When you go sleigh riding, play out in the cold, camping, your hands are cold, your feet are cold, hand warmers are wonderful for that.
Okay, and you've also got little baggies with a folded up emergency poncho. These come in handy in times of rain and keeping...
If you don't have a jacket handy, then the poncho will come in handy.
All right, now you also have a special tool here. We've got lots of utensils that you're used to seeing kind of in a camping situation, but this is a new one. Open this up and...
Well, it doesn't look like a knife, fork, spoon, but here's your salt and pepper right on the end here.
Oh, interesting. So right in here, salt
Yes,
and pepper.
and then
okay.
you open it up, shake it, close it, turn it around, do the pepper, and then inside you have your
Oh, I keep thinking of the holidays and thinking this would be a great stocking stuffer
That's right.
for every family member.
Good idea.
That is a wonderful idea. Now, we also have some very small, compact ways of cooking food that you've got here on display. This one is using what source in order to heat a skillet?
This is a stove in a can, and it's so compact. And people, that's their concern is, how do I cook? You know, I don't have room to put a stove in my emergency kit. So this is a stove in a can, and all it is, it looks like a half-size paint can, and then you have some wood chips inside that you can make your fire, and one tablet will last for 90 minutes.
Oh, so you should be able to complete a meal easily.
And
in
then
90 minutes.
it comes apart, and it's very.
And this is fairly
compact.
affordable, a little stove in a can like this. Okay, and you also have one now that is actually gas-powered that you've brought. It's called the Quick Range.
This is a butane gas, and it's also easy. It's compact, doesn't take a lot of space, and so there's all different types of ways to cook your food. So see what will work best for you and your family.
Great, thank you. And we appreciate that you brought us some samples or some demonstrations of the different type of kits. We've gone over kind of some of the basics that need to be in every kit, but you've actually kind of tailored each of these to different situations. So let's start with what you have at the office. What do you recommend having?
This is a tote bag on wheels, and wheels are wonderful because, again, I can just grab it and wheel off. And the wheels fold under, and you can purchase tote bags with wheels at any luggage store. And then inside the colored pouch here, I have all the needs: toothbrush, toothpaste, combs, lotion.
And that normally fits right inside the bag.
Yes, and I have a battery-operated radio inside, and things that will take care of me in the office, because if we have a disaster during the daytime, we may not be able to just get in our car and drive home, so we'll be stranded at our place of business.
I thought this was very smart, too, for you to include a pair of headphones to plug into the radio.
That's right.
So that you'd have that available. I also noticed that on your office kit you have a pretty noisy whistle. What's the point of having a whistle with your office kit?
Whistles can be heard over voice, and so put a whistle in every kit that you create, because whistles are important.
And you made also an important point earlier about why you pack hard sole shoes in your office kit, and that has a lot to do with just your personal dress habits. You groom nicely, you like to wear high heels, and you don't want to be running out and high heels for the rest of the day in an emergency. So you include a pair of shoes, and it's something we need to think about. Here, though, this is a typical diaper bag. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we can be prepared and taking care of our infants and children. Is this a separate one that you advise people to have accessible?
No. This does not mean that mom has to create a separate emergency diaper bag. If she can just make it a habit to keep the diaper bag refilled. But it doesn't hurt to put emergency items in the diaper bag, like a small flashlight, emergency blanket, poncho, whistle, things that she could use for an emergency, but normally this is what baby uses.
Okay, so it's just a little bit more of an elaboration of what you would carry with you every day. You just add some of the emergency essentials, which were the flashlight, the poncho, and now what about formula? I notice here, though, that you've brought this. Why do you have a separate container of formula?
Well, mom needs formula for baby, and also pack water pouches in with the diaper bag, maybe 3-4 pouches with the formula, and there you have the formula for the baby.
Wonderful, and this would be easily 72 hours, this much formula.
That's right.
Depending on the size of the baby, I guess, if we go there too. Now, we have a smaller backpack, but it's full of a lot of items, and this is something we use for our children.
Yes, every child should have their own emergency backpack by their bedside, and place it under the head of your bed with the handle out so you can just reach underneath and pull it out.
Oh, and you make the point, speaking of pulling it out, this backpack, again, has wheels at the bottom.
That's right.
And kids love to have these handles pull it right behind them, so excited. You also have some custom items that, beyond the basic toiletries and the clothing, you've also included a stuffed animal.
Yes, have stress. It's a stress relief. Stuffed animal, coloring books, even a little radio with music, to reading books, to relieve the stress from a disaster for children.
Now, you have beautiful nails, and so you have included in your own personal kit supplies to be able to file and take care of your nails.
Right.
If need.
That's right. So just pack things that the children, like Band-Aids, tissues, toothbrush, toothpaste, little things to add to their kit.
And if you keep the backpack small and portable, then can you, I guess, ideally expect that the child would be able to cargo, be able to carry this? Because I can imagine somebody, a mother of 6 children, trying to carry 6 different backpacks and pulling along. And so the idea is to try to keep children as portable and being able to take care of.
You won't have food and water in their backpacks, just their clothing and reading.
I'm sorry for interrupting at that point. Do you also encourage, you've got, this one also has on the front part of the backpack a place for some a little pouch with the basics, flashlight, the whistle, but can you also include in that maybe some identification information, ID cards?
There's phone numbers to call grandparents and mom and dad, and then hard candies for energy boost, because when you experience something dramatic, I mean, it just takes the energy right out of you. So hard candy will give you energy.
I'll probably put that in my own personal kit too, because there's someone soothing. Let's talk, speaking of soothing, one of the areas we get fearful about it at disaster is what's going to happen to our pets. And though we just have another couple minutes left in the show, I do want us to take an opportunity to show what you have, that you actually can prepare an emergency kit for a pet.
That's right. Your house pets are part of the family also. So have water packets and food. I have a cat, and so I have litter for her, a shirt box for the litter box.
All zip-locked in small containers.
Yes, and then blankets and leash, collar, things that your house pet needs.
And that would fit, and these are wonderful little backpacks. So this could actually fit some of those basic essentials for the pet there as well. Now, you have a wonderful car kit. This is something that I think I would like to emulate. So go ahead and stand on this side, and I'm going to stand behind you for just a minute and lift this up, because this is a multi-layered car kit, another plastic rubber container on wheels.
That's right.
And yet it has wonderful information. Now, compared to the other kits that we prepared, are there any specific things that are specific to the car kit that you don't have in other kits?
Well, everybody should have a shovel, flashlight, blanket or emergency blanket in their vehicles, and water. You can put anything in your car besides the tools to change your flat tire, first aid, but make sure you have those 4 items.
You also have some cash ready on hand. I thought that was an important thing as well. Mask. This is just a fabulous way for someone to go ahead and store their items. Now, I'm thinking about my house and where we store different things. What is your advice for the best place to store these type of packs or kits so that they're ready to go when we head out the door?
If you can remember not to store any of your emergency kits in the basement of your home. Try to keep your kits on the main level of your home, or like my office, it's under my desk, car in the trunk, children under their bed, and the baby diaper bag, place it by the crib.
Marilyn, thank you so much for joining us today. Such helpful information. We'll have more of this information available for you when you check our website. And thank you so much for joining us here on Living Essentials. Be sure to join us next time. Bye-bye. For more information on this and other episodes of Living, we try to make sure we have what we need.
Getting a year's supply of food is a big job. Some people don't know where to start. People are concerned about the cost and where they'll store all that food. Some people don't know how to cook with it, and they're worried that it won't taste good. Good information helps people get around these barriers.
Okay, well then let's give them some of that great information. We have samples here right now, Lisa. We've got wonderful displays of grains, but in general, besides grains, what are some of the other general types of food we should be storing, Lisa?
Well, you want to look for food that is inexpensive and space efficient to store. You also want food that's highly nutritious and food that has a long shelf life. And by that I mean food that can actually sit on the shelf without refrigeration for quite some time. Now, foods that meet all of this criteria are foods like grains, legumes, oil, powdered milk, sugars, salt, and some water.
Now, are there some actually specific health benefits from the type of food that we choose to store?
Yes, actually, whole grains and legumes are at the top of the list of foods recommended for our day. Currently in the United States, we have serious health concerns with heart disease, cancer, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. The soluble fiber in oats, barley, dried beans, peas, and lentils has been scientifically proven to lower blood cholesterol. The fiber in whole grains significantly lowers the risk of coronary heart disease and type 2 diabetes. Let's talk about cancer for a minute. 1/3 of all cancer deaths is related to nutrition, exercise, obesity, and other lifestyle factors. The American Cancer Association has said that beans are especially rich in nutrients that may protect against cancer, and they're a low-fat, high-protein alternative to meat. So this is a huge argument for not only storing these foods, but eating them now.
Which has been one of the concepts that has always been taught to me is store the type of foods that you will eat. And maybe some of us need to kind of go back to eating the food that we're storing in order to get back to healthy lifestyles. Earlier, I started to kind of point us in the grain direction, because I think when I'm thinking of food storage, one of my first thoughts is the grains, making sure we either have the beans there or the rice or the grains. And there is a lot, Lisa, here, and introduce to us these.
Yes, there are. In the grain category, it's recommended that you store 300 pounds per person for a year's supply. Now, there are lots of options in the grains, like you were saying. You could add to the wheat, you could add rice, macaroni, some barley, pasta, lots of different things in this category. When it comes to wheat, though, you have two nice options. There is a hard white option and a hard red wheat. Both of them store 20 years or more. Both of them are very nutritious and have about the same nutrition. However, the white wheat, this one right here, makes a lighter colored and a lighter tasting product, and it has become very, very popular today.
So when we see breads that are made out of light wheat, this is what they're referring to.
That's right.
And this is the typical red grain. Now, what would you typically use if you're trying to cycle this through, Leslie? What would you use on recipe-wise, these red grain and lighter grain?
You know, it's just so easy to grind wheat up, either grain, and use it as you would regular white flour and the usual kinds of foods that we eat every day: breads, cookies, pancakes, muffins. When it comes to cooking barley, barley takes about 45 minutes to cook, so you can throw it in any super stew and just let it cook along with the rest of the ingredients.
About 45 minutes, that's what you're saying with the barley? If anyone has not seen barley before, this was the first time for me. I was trying to recognize that. But it is also a member of the grain family and very nutritious. And in 45 minutes, is that about the same length then of long grain rice? A little bit longer than that?
Long grain rice is only 20 minutes.
It feels like 45 when we're Well, we have some samples of grains. That's one type of food that we're encouraged to store as well. But what about legumes?
Well, in the legume category, it's recommended that 60 pounds would be for one person for a year. And again, in this category, you want to store a variety of legumes. You've got things like your kidney beans, you've got split peas, you've got white beans and pinto beans. So there's a lot of different things that you can do in this category to suit your taste and your needs.
In terms of tips for cooking the legumes, and you included the beans, and we have a sample here of split peas. Any tips for cooking that we have for these?
Well, yes. You can either, in this area, you can store the dried legumes or the canned legumes. If you store dried legumes, you need to know that they will need to be hydrated. They're a little hard to taste. And so this is easy to do. It's nothing really hard. All you do is soak them for a little while beforehand, and then you cook them. And once they're cooked, they can easily be added to soups and stews and casseroles and even some baked goods. Now, if you decide to store canned beans like these here, instead of storing the dried, and you don't want to go through the soaking and cooking process, you can store these and just store 2.5 times the dried amount. Now, there's one more alternative here. Some people don't like beans at all or don't want to eat them very much. And if that's you, then what you can actually do is store some canned meats. They can switch out pound for pound with your dried legumes.
Because they're both protein rich.
That's right. So you can store things like canned roast beef, canned ham, canned turkey, or chicken instead of your legumes. Remember, you switch them out pound for pound with your dried legumes.
Oh, that's a great idea. Now, we need to have these legumes. We need to have the grains. We also need to have powdered milk. Introduce us to what we have here on display.
The original recommendation for powdered milk was 75 pounds per person. However, with the brands of milk that are available today and the change in mixing instructions, it's possible to store 50 pounds per person to get the recommended 3 cups of milk a day. There is another option. It is possible to store as little as 16 pounds of powdered milk if you increase the grains to 400 pounds per person. Currently, there is research ongoing about whether this option provides enough calcium in the diet. Certainly it does not for growing children and for pregnant and lactating women. Milk has a shorter shelf life. It lasts between 3 and 5 years. Some will go as long as 10 years. So it's really important to store a kind of milk that you like and to rotate it so it doesn't go to waste.
Now, I use a lot of the non-fat dry milk at my house and any of the cream soups that I have anytime I make a cream of broccoli or cream soup. This is kind of what we use. But do you actually have tips that you can recommend? Because some of us might not exactly know. Some of the kids are not sure they're thrilled with instant milk.
That's right.
But what do you advise?
Well, you will use some milk, some dried milk, in your cooking and baking. But by far, the largest use of dried milk will be in drinking. So as Leslie mentioned, dried milk is the most expensive and also the most wasted item in food storage. So you really want to taste a variety of milks before you go buying anything in larger quantities so that you're sure that you'll drink the milk that you're actually storing.
And how long would a typical container of non-fat dry milk?
Well, like she said, most brands will recommend 3 to 5 years, but some will actually go and be just quite fine for 10 years or more.
And you'd be surprised with the quality of dried milk that there is on the market today. There's some really great tasting powdered milk, so it's worth experimenting.
We've also tried whey. Is it dried whey? And
whey-based milk.
Like that as well. We also have sugars here, and people might be surprised that we actually have the sweeteners and the sugars here as part of our staples, but let's talk a little bit about why we need to have these in our food storage as well.
Well, sugar is really important, and it's a good way to get things to taste good. And people don't realize that you can store a variety of sweet-tasting foods. Besides storing honey and sugar, you can include maple syrup, jams and jellies, fruit drink mix, and flavored gelatin.
Wonderful. Now, we also have some samples here, Lisa, of the different type of oils that we need to be storing.
In this category, you're going to want to store 20 pounds or 10 liquid quarts of oil. Of all the different types of food storage things we've talked about so far, though, oil has the tightest shelf life. It stores for 1 to 2 years if in a cool, dark place. There is a nice thing to know, though, about this. If you're worried about getting through all your liquid oil before it goes bad, you have an option of putting some of that recommended amount into shortening. Now, Crisco brand actually says that their shortening, if stored in a cool, dark place, unopened, will store indefinitely. So that means that you could put some of the recommended amount, like I said, in shortening, and then just worry about getting through your liquid amount before it goes bad.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, isn't that great? Then other things that also fall into this category would be things like mayonnaise, peanut butter, and salad dressings would count for oils too.
All of those that contain oil in there as well. Now, the very front of this display, we have some other basics that are recommended for every family storage area. We've got salts And we also have some other vitamins and, interestingly enough, garden seeds. And let's talk about those.
Salt is important in the diet, and it's recommended that you store 8 pounds per person. It's a good idea to get iodized salt to ensure that you have enough iodine in your diet. Multivitamins also ensure that we have the needed vitamins and minerals, and garden seeds are a really great idea. It's good to practice growing them and using fresh produce out of your very own garden right now.
How long would actually an envelope of seeds last?
You know, seeds from different vegetables last a varying amount of time, and so to keep that all simple, which is our bottom line, we just rotate seeds every year. You can buy them on sale and then plant them the next year and buy some more, and that keeps it simple.
Wonderful. That's great. Another basic element in our food storage is the water. What is the basic recommendation for each family member?
Well, it's impossible to store a year's supply of water, right? But a 2-week supply, which is 14 gallons per person, is recommended. Okay. Now, this is different from and in addition to a 72-hour supply, which is 3 gallons per person. So the 14 gallons, which is a 2-week supply, you would have 7 gallons for cooking and drinking and 7 gallons for hygiene. And of all the water to store, believe it or not, your municipal or city water is the safest and the cheapest water to store.
Now, there's been some new tips that have been out from national agencies about emergency preparedness related to that.
Yes, there are, and they help to dispel some myths that are circulating around. The American Red Cross is now saying that if you store city or municipal water, you do not need to pre-treat it with bleach before you store it. In fact, the American Red Cross and FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, actually say that if you do pre-treat water with bleach, it's superfluous and does not extend the shelf life of water.
Interesting. That's important to note, because it's a big difference. And I think one of the hallmarks of why we were always so afraid to drink the containered water, because it tasted so much like the bleach water that's been out there.
Now, one more thing. If you do store, if your tap water comes from a well, you will need to follow what your local water authority tells you to do for pre-treating water. So follow what they say.
Go ahead and contact your local water authority, and they'll have the information you need. You have lots of different containers that you've brought today to show as samples of what we can use for storing water. Differences between the...
Yes, there are safe and unsafe water containers. Unsafe water containers would be things like water beds or bleach bottles or milk cartons, because they tend to disintegrate over time. But safe water containers would be things like a 2-liter soda pop bottle, food-grade plastic containers, or even larger barrels. Now, the American Red Cross is suggesting that we rinse all of our containers with a diluted bleach solution before actually storing water in them. During Y2K, we saw lots of, because of the concern there, we saw lots of used soda pop syrup barrels on the market. They were very inexpensive, and many people bought them, but they are not recommended for storing drinking water, because the sugars from the syrup get into the plastic and they provide food for bacteria over time. So when storing that 2-week supply per person, that 14 gallons, and you may need quite a bit if you have a family, you're going to want to have maybe a larger container, and new containers or new barrels is a great idea.
Speaking of barrels, I actually store something that's, you don't have represented here. It's Mylar bags with a spigot, and they come in a cardboard box. I actually get it from a water company, and they stack quite nicely. They also make for recycling purposes quite nicely, because we camp a lot, and we can just take this cardboard Mylar bag to the campsite and take it with us. Are there things we should know about Mylar and its advantages or disadvantages?
That's a great thing to have, and if that's what fits your space and your particular circumstance, that's great. One thing that's critical to know about stored water is what all the national emergency authorities are saying now. And national emergency authorities, we're talking about people like American Red Cross and FEMA and Homeland Security and these type of people. All of them say that you need to change and replace water every 6 months, and not every year as was previously the thought.
Great. Now, and that might become very important when we start talking about these containers would be great for those 2-week supplies, but we can actually use these barrels for a longer period of time, and so the rotation.
That's right.
About how much water is actually stored in that size?
I think that's probably a 15 or 30. These are, about 5 or so. Now, your 72-hour supply, you're going to you'll want to store in containers smaller than this barrel. And that's where a 2-liter pop bottle would be ideal, because you could just pick it up and take it with you if you needed to.
You need that portability for that 72-hour kit. And then this, again, would need to be drained every 6 months.
That's right.
And refilled again. Okay, great. Now, we just take a look at the basics that are recommended for food storage, but anyone who cooks knows that you actually need to have some other additional elements to make it very palatable and very tasty. And so we've got some samples here of some of the other basics that are important for a good kitchen. So let's start here on what you've brought in terms of leavening products.
It's really important to store leavening like yeast, baking soda, and baking powder, and also bouillon, and also spices. All of these things are important for adding variety in the kinds of things that you can cook with the basics.
Also, when you talk about basics, one thing that is kind of easy to spot on all of the goods that you brought today are the date of purchase that you have added to that. Very important. Just the other day, I pulled out some yeast and was making some bread and couldn't get it to rise, and found out through the imprint that it was about 5 years old. Now, what about the bouillon? Why is this considered a basic?
Bouillon is really wonderful to have in simple soups that you can make with beans, and also in stews and other kinds of dishes. It just really expands what you can make.
Okay, so these are the basics for baking, but what about the canned goods?
Canned fruits, vegetables, and meats also add really important nutrition to basic food storage. And of course, they would expand, again, really greatly the kinds of things that you can fix with basic food storage.
All right, let's talk about the shelf life of a typical item that is canned.
Okay, I want to talk about the commercially canned food here. Canned food experts and the USDA all say that this food, commercially canned food, is safe to eat almost indefinitely as long as the can is not dented or bulging. They suggest that for optimum flavor, texture, and color, that canned foods be used within about 2 to 2.5 years. However, the Canned Food Alliance, which represents a number of canned food companies, says that the nutrition in commercially canned foods will last well beyond 2 years.
What about the shelf life, though, of some of the other mixes that we might find in our pantry or store in our pantry? How long does an average, like stuffing mix, for example, would we expect that? Obviously not indefinitely like a canned good.
Yeah, well, you can store these ready-to-make things like muffin mixes and soup mixes and cake mixes and those kind of things, but it will have a shorter shelf life, like you said, usually about 6 months or so. So if you decide to build up a year's supply of these ready-made or ready-to-make things, you have to know that you're going to have to get through those on a constant basis and constantly be using those. Plus, that's going to take up a lot more space because of all the packaging. And a year's supply of those ready-made mixes are going to be a lot more expensive to store.
Good. You also brought up a point which is very surprising to me, and I think we need to kind of go over. One of the key sources of protein that I have always stored at my home is tuna. And yet, it's not maybe the optimal choice. Tell us about that.
You can actually, tuna is actually good to have in food storage. The interesting thing is that it really doesn't have a shelf life beyond 2 years. Tuna can develop some very strong flavor and texture alterations after that 2 years. So that's important to keep in mind.
And versus comparing that, for example, to a can of ham like I held up, or chicken, how long does that last?
The guidelines that we mentioned previously for all canned foods really apply to those. They'll last 5 years or longer, as long as the can isn't dented or bulging. They're safe to eat.
Well, you're speaking of also of cans of dents and bulges. What are the optimal or recommended containers to use for canning fruits and vegetables, or for storing fruits and vegetables or meat?
Well, you would want to store commercially canned meat, or of course if you're bottling it, you'd need to be sure to pressure cook it. That's a really important thing to be aware of. Let's talk about this packaging. The packaging of your food can greatly affect the shelf life of that food. Moisture, light, and air all adversely affect food. So packaging that is airtight and opaque is really the very best to get your food to last a long time. Having the lack of oxygen inside that container also will prolong that food. So you have a number 10 can as an option for dried food, or you can get dried food or actually put it in these packages, these foil pouches, and you put a little oxy pack which absorbs the oxygen in them to cause the food to last longer.
Am I correct that also that these Mylar bags or the foil bags help protect the items from light, which is one of the items that actually light that destroys the food within?
Yes, that's exactly right. You can get food in buckets, and it is important to ask for heavy white buckets so that that very issue of light doesn't trouble the shelf life of the food inside. These are also packed with an oxy pack or two inside to absorb the oxygen. It's really important to request lids that have either a gasket inside here or some sort of rubber that's been stamped inside so that the bucket is airtight and will cause the food to last for a longer time.
We have a small email from one of our viewers that I'd like to share with you, and let's talk a little bit about it. Will you please talk, this is Elizabeth from Plainview, New York. She says, will you please talk about the differences between West Coast storage and Southern and East Coast storage? High humidity levels can make a big difference, and I'll echo that. It's not just altitude we need to worry about, but the humidity differences. So Lisa, let's talk about that.
Well, no matter if you live in a humid climate or a dry climate, food that is stored properly will store for a very, very long time. However, in moist climates, more humid areas, you do want to make very certain that your food is stored off the floor just a bit and slightly away from the walls so that air can circulate and you don't have condensation or mold growth. That's very important. Now, in moist climates, once the containers are opened, as well as in dry climates, you have about a year to get through that food. But as people that live in moist climates know, you've got to keep that food sealed in an airtight or moisture-proof container. So if the containers that you're using like this aren't able to have an airtight lid put on them, you'll need to transfer them to a moisture-proof airtight container. Now in moist climates too, these foil packages might be a great option. Where there's a lot of humidity, sometimes the metal cans can rust a bit, and that's a concern. So putting them in these foil pouches would help stop that rusting problem.
That's a great idea. Let's talk about rotation, because I think that's one of the key elements. We talked about barriers, about what keeps us from wanting to store. Sometimes we feel like we don't know how to organize it or rotate it. Some quick tips on how we should do that?
Rotating really comes in two parts. The first part is the physical organization of the food that you store. It's important to date every package of food that you buy, and then whether you stack food on shelves or on the floor, you add the new packages of food to the bottom of the stack in the back and keep the older ones to the front so that you will use those packages. It's also important to consider how long it will take your family to get through a container. That will influence what size of container you buy food in. Sometimes people, when they buy food in a bucket, of course it will cost more because there's more food in the bucket, and they'll say, I'm not going to open that bucket. It cost a lot of money, and so I'm not going to use that food. So if you know that you're that kind of a person, it would probably be better for you to buy food in a number 10 can, so you'd be more willing to open it and experiment with the food and use it. The second part of rotating is simply that we need to be eating the food that we're storing. It's really important to taste some of everything that you buy in bulk so you're sure you like it. It's also a great idea to serve food storage meals to your family and let them vote on the meals that they would like to eat. That way you can store the extra foods that are needed to get the basics to taste good in that recipe. If you have a pool of good tasting recipes and you will eat food storage meals 2 days out of a week, you can have an entire year's supply of food storage rotated in just 3.5 years.
Oh, that's a wonderful piece of advice. Twice a week. in terms of storage as well, just quickly, these spices, about how long would they last? Because we talked about wanting to have these in our meals, but how long would we expect spices to last?
You know, I don't worry so much about spices. The bottom line for both of us is to keep it simple. And so we just go through our spices, and if they're getting a little old and you need to add a little more, you throw it in. But we don't really keep track of dates for spices.
As long as you have it in the pantry, you'll be just fine. Speaking of the pantry, because a lot of us live in many different types of homes, anything we should be keeping in mind as to where we should store the food. I'm lucky enough to live in a house with a basement with a cellar. What do you advise, Lisa, in terms of what's the best spot to store food for the longest period of time?
Well, there's all kinds of places you can store food, whether you have lots of space or limited space. You'd be surprised how much food storage a typical hall closet can hold. I know some people that have to put their food storage underneath their beds, even using the food as the bed base. Other people I know with limited space actually make these lovely bedside or chairside tables using boxes of food as the base with a piece of material over it and then covering it, with a piece of wood or glass or something. And even a bookshelf can hold an amazing amount of food. And if you're lucky enough to have some garage shelves, some of those heavy-duty things, they can hold a lot of weight and are a great option.
We have just another minute or so left in the show, but before we go, because we want people to watch this and listen to this and think, I'm going to start right now doing this, what are some quick tips to begin that food storage program?
Have a plan, and I think there's a plan on your website. Start with a plan. In 20 minutes, you can have it planned for, and you'll know right where to spend your money, and you won't waste it.
All right. Any other quick tips, Leslie?
I think it's just really important to get going. As you're acquiring it, you can think in terms of just getting a week's supply and then build up to a month or two until you have a year's supply. So you set aside some money, make a commitment to be buying food storage every week.
Well, we appreciate you bringing your expertise, the authors who have brought so much to our community. We appreciate you sharing that with us here on Living Essentials. And again, we'll have a lot of this information on our website as well. Many of us have a tendency to say, we'll get to tomorrow. But the events of September 11th changed that for everyone, especially for members of the Manhattan Fifth Ward in New York City. The devastation unfolded right before their eyes. I remember waking up and looking out my windows, and it was just the clearest blue day. And I was looking out the window because I was going to head right downtown to the World Trade Centers.
I actually worked in the 72nd floor of the World Trade Center. I usually leave at 5 or 5:30 in the morning and go in and work out, and then I get to my office about 7:30. But on this occasion, I decided to stay home, and so I was still here at the part when all this thing started to unfold.
I was doing exercise in the living room, and suddenly enormous sound, and then the whole building shook.
When it happened, she came racing into the bedroom to get me and said a bomb went off in the World Trade Center. And I went out to a balcony, looked around at the World Trade Center, and said, I told her, that's not a bomb. It was a plane. Can't you see the shape on the side of the building? You can see where the wings and the main part of the fuselage. It was very obviously that a plane went into the building. And of course, everyone thought that it was a terrible mistake. No one realized at that moment that it was an act of terrorism.
The week of September 11th, I happened to be in Georgia, and someone said, aren't you from New York? There's something here on the news, you should take a look. It was before the second plane had hit, and there was still the speculation of, it was a FedEx plane, or it was a small plane, or it was an accident.
And all of a sudden, we heard this huge, loud roar. And what it was the second plane, and the second plane came in right over our building. And then we heard a huge explosion. And so we knew something was very wrong.
You start to realize this is not, I haven't thought about it for a long time. This is not an ordinary event that people I know work in those buildings and live literally, just feet away from there. And this is not going to be something simple and easy.
We watched on top of of our building until the first tower fell.
I heard a loud rumble,
It sounded like an airplane. It was just like a loud and then a crash. And then I saw people running from my balcony. I could see them on the ground running, saying, "Get out, run, get out, get out."
The cloud of smoke and dust came rushing toward us. It was just fearsome, and people were running up the West Side Highway trying to get away as fast as possible, many running for their lives.
As we all know, soon after that, the North Tower fell too. And everyone realized that this disaster had changed the world. It also changed the way we think about our own safety.
A lot of the recent national and worldwide focus on being prepared for acts of terrorism has heightened awareness to emergency preparedness and kind of driven the message home a little bit. However, we do see the same thing occurring after a major tornado or a hurricane or an earthquake or a major winter storm. There's always that heightened level of awareness.
Emergencies are basically all the same. You have an event and then you go to recover from that event. So if you prepare for that event, you put together your 72-hour kits and your items that you need to take with you, and you prepare for a variety of events, an earthquake, a flood, a tornado, mudslide, whatever it may be, but the preparation is basically the same for all.
One of my favorite emergency management slogans is the farmer who said, "I can sleep when the wind blows." And the correlation to this, of course, is that when there are trouble times and the wind is blowing, that his farm is secure. Things are in place, they're tied down, and he knows exactly what he's going to do first, second, and third if the wind really starts blowing hard. That gives people a certain peace of mind and allows you to focus on other things once you know that that is taken care of doing your duty to your people that you have stewardship over, getting to work on time, taking care of the family.
On September 11th, shortly after the second tower fell, Glade Holman left Atlanta and began driving home. As an LDS bishop, he was very concerned about the welfare of his ward. While he was on the road, his wife and other ward leaders began the overwhelming task of finding each and every member.
I basically didn't sleep for three nights, as we were just, from the time I left Georgia, driving through that thing for 17 hours, landed here, finally back here in the house, and then coordinating the efforts, finding people where they were, making sure they were someplace that they had a roof over their heads.
We received calls from quite a number of people. I think all the members that knew where we lived called that were aware of what had happened. We received wonderful support from the church and concern from them.
We were emailing lists back and forth. We found this one. Did you find that one? No, we got this one. Did you get that one? And we just had a story for every single name in the end. We had an Excel spreadsheet with the time that they were contacted, the comment, and that's a spreadsheet I don't want to lose, but it's got the story for every single person of talk to the doorman who saw him yesterday, he's okay, or met the sister, says they're fine. And finally, after, I could not personally myself let it go until I had every name signed off.
With the help of ward leadership, Bishop Holman was able to locate every member of the ward and confirm that all were alive and okay. As night fell on September 11th, the rescue efforts continued. Many of those who lived nearby had not yet been evacuated. They had, however, lost power and water.
Hallway is completely dark without the light. So everybody opened the door and kept it open, and we could see each other. And we went to each other's apartment, "Are you okay?" and so on, worried about each other. And then somebody said, "Oh, I don't have any water." And I invited neighbors and shared my candles, water. And we were really one, united that night.
Eventually, all of Lower Manhattan was evacuated. That meant members of the Fifth Ward didn't have access to their food storage. They had to rely on help from friends and relief agencies instead. But there are other emergency situations where it's vital to have food storage within reach. Extended power outages, a truck driver strike, or even losing a job. For the Richards family of Falmouth, Maine, It was an ice storm. Bruce and Nancy Richards enjoy living on the beautiful eastern seaboard, but the winters in Maine can be severe. This was the case in January of 1998 when a terrible ice storm hit. Throughout the state, tree branches heavy with ice were knocking down power lines, smashing cars, and blocking roads. Most Mainers found themselves without power for up to 2 weeks. Within hours, grocery store shelves were virtually empty, and trucks were unable to get in to restock them. Without power, food in refrigerators and freezers was quickly going bad. Many people found themselves in a situation where they needed food, they needed heat, and they needed these things right away.
Unlike, I guess, many of our neighbors who were rushing out to the store to try and stock up on food, we didn't even think about it because we just go to the basement anyway to prepare our meals. And so that wasn't really an issue for us at all.
The Richards have always maintained a supply of food storage in their basement. For them, it's just a way of life.
We sort of look at it as a reservoir, a pool of foodstuffs, if you will. And so when Nancy shops, she just buys to put into the reservoir. Whenever we fix a meal, we just go to the food storage and take the ingredients out of that, so that it's always, being replenished. And I would say that almost all of our meals just come to us that way.
Not only do they stock their shelves from the local grocery store, but they also grow a garden. Things like potatoes, tomatoes, onions, and carrots will end up in their food storage and will be used throughout the year. But for the Richards, gardening together is more than just for food storage. It's also a time to talk, a time to think, and a time to learn about the law of the harvest.
I think when President Kimball told everyone to grow a garden, it wasn't necessarily the food he was concerned about. It's the, you learn a different sort of pace of life when you have to wait for things to grow. And when you plant the pumpkin seed, you're not going to get a pumpkin until you've gone through the natural cycle of what it takes to grow a pumpkin. So you learn patience, you learn, those things that our forefathers knew just because they were tied to the land. And those are things I think President Kimball knew we needed to know.
After the ice storm, when temperatures dropped to 20 below at night, a source of heat was another big concern for many. Once again, the Richards were prepared.
We actually have 3 different energy sources to heat our home, and the wood stove is the most useful when all the electricity's out. And so we try during the course of the year to, chop wood and save it and dry it and have it ready.
Their preparation beforehand allowed the Richards to not only survive the ice storm, but to thrive in it. They were even able to reach out to their neighbors and share what they had.
We called everybody and invited them over, and we had a big chili cook-off. And I had some frozen bread dough downstairs in the freezer, thawed that, and made fried bread in a big old cast iron frying pan. And admission to the party was a bucket of water. 1 bucket of water, good for a free dinner. And we just sat around and talked and visited with each other, and it was a fun experience.
In a sense, it's kind of an adventure, when that occurs. And I wouldn't say it was a disaster in the sense that people were worried about dying or anything like that, but it was an inconvenience, and people and neighbors had to pull together and help each other more. It feels like you need to have a little mini disaster every once in a while just to kind of remember and learn again that we should watch out for each other.
President Benson gave counsel saying that we should not go into debt to get our food storage or to become prepared for emergencies. Instead, he said we needed to realign our priorities. And if that means that we need to forego a vacation or forego a bigger TV set or an upgrade in our car, or perhaps even smaller things like movie tickets or eating out every weekend, and we needed to readjust our priorities. And he actually said the words, and we need to do this now.
People find that overwhelming because planning for a whole year supply is, it's a big job. Certainly trying to figure out what you would store, how you would rotate it, how you're going to finance all of that, where you're going to put it in your home. Those are things that people find very difficult to figure out. The key is to keep it simple.
I know lots of families who decide that they're going to have a food storage budget for their family, and they set aside X amount of dollars every week or every month, and then they use that money to get a little bit at a time. So they either get small packages of things or things in bigger quantities, and that food storage budget then allows them to have that dedicated. They don't spend that money on other things. And what you'll find is getting just a little bit of something will encourage you and will get you excited about getting more.
The basic foods that have been recommended for many years are inexpensive. They're space efficient. And that means that they're a very good place to start. Those basic foods would include wheat and other grains, legumes, sugar and honey, oil, salt, garden seeds, and water.
The church actually has a booklet. It's a brown booklet, and it's called Essentials of Home Production and Storage. And in there, there's a list of how much to store for each person for a year. So if you look at those quantities and you times them out by the number of people in your family, you'll get a large amount of food. Don't be overwhelmed or don't be discouraged because the amount seems so large. Start with maybe 10 pounds of something, 20 pounds of something. You need enough water to get you through 2 weeks. And for that, it's recommended that we have 14 gallons per person. Now, that's not a whole lot of water, but it's enough for simple hygiene and it's enough for cooking. And instead of keeping those barrels of wheat in the basement, actually start using some of that wheat. Start experimenting with some of it so that you know how to fix it in an emergency and your family is accustomed to eating it.
Unfortunately, in the past, there have been recipes that float around that people try and they're just not that good. And so that has caused people to decide in their minds that this is an impossibility, that food storage really never could taste good anyway. So why would I even try to find good tasting recipes? It is possible to find very good tasting recipes using only stored food, and it is well worth the search to find them. I can have a good food storage recipe put together in about 5 minutes. These recipes are so fast that even a husband can fix them when the wife is busy. Teenagers can fix food storage meals because they're so easy and fast. If you're using dried vegetables, they're already cut up, so children can learn how to cook fixing a food storage recipe because they're so simple.
Different families in different localities will find that they have to adjust how they store their food storage in different ways. The family in Southern California may only have room to store their food storage in a hot garage, and that may be the only place because of the size of a home or an apartment or a condo or whatever. In an apartment, you may only have room to store your food storage in a closet or under a bed, or to actually make a lovely side table out of stacks of your boxes of wheat or whatever. Whatever works for you in your situation is what you need to do.
We lifted the bed way up, that I'm kind of short, so I have to get onto the bed by stool. And so we have plenty of water, wheat, and then I have lots of dry food in the jar, and then I have fresh food, like canned, that you have to use within 2 years, all in the front of the shelves.
When it comes to food storage, anyone living in an apartment knows you have to be creative. Curtis and Rhonda Lynn Page live with their 4 children in an apartment in Pasadena, California. They too have found innovative ways to make it work.
We have a coat closet in the hall that I put some shelving up in, and we put most of our food supply in there. And then in one of the bedroom closets, we've dedicated a small portion of that to store water.
We have 2 cribs. We put baby supplies, things like that, toiletries, under cribs and under bunk beds. We can put it under our own bed. We put water under sinks.
An interesting point about storing water is that it should be stored in small enough containers that can be carried. Water is heavy. Anything that's designed for long-term storage of liquid is good. Stay away from milk cartons, stay away from Clorox bottles, things like that. The 2-liter pop bottles are generally considered a good source. They're small enough that a child could carry it if they had to. and easy to rotate that water, you know, pour it out and refill it once a year if you need to. So remember that what you store, you may have to carry. And if you have a 50-gallon drum of water, nobody could roll it out, and it probably won't fit in the Volkswagen.
The Pages live right between two fault lines and not far from Northridge, where in 1994, a terrible earthquake hit. Measuring 6.7 on the Richter scale, the quake caused severe structural damage, displaced thousands, and took 51 lives. Being prepared for this kind of an emergency, where there is literally no warning, is obviously very important to the Pages. In their ward, they serve as emergency preparedness coordinators for their area. Every other month, they host an emergency preparedness meeting with neighbors and members of their ward who live close by. They review their emergency response plan, update contact information, and discuss ways to become more prepared for an earthquake or any other kind of emergency that may occur. Many in the group are ham radio and CPR certified. They have designated an empty lot up the street as a meeting place should they have to evacuate their homes. Each meeting, they offer preparedness items that can be purchased at a discount, such as first aid kits and flashlights, wheat grinders, and water barrels. They've learned that by working together, they can be more prepared should disaster strike. In their own family, the Pages discuss their emergency plan with their children and try to reassure them that should something happen, they know what they need to do.
To be prepared, I mean, it's just a calming thing, just to know that we can take care of our family and we can take care of others if they need it.
In creating a family emergency plan, look first to the type of emergencies that you might face and what are the most common emergencies that happen to families. Extended power outages because of storms, very common. Fires in the home, hazardous material spills, things like that. So we actually need to plan out what would we do. If we have to get out of this house, how can we do it? Is there more than one way out of the house? Just reminding the family what the smoke detector sounds like, what the carbon monoxide detector sounds like, where would we meet once we get out. So we plan that out as a family, we work through it, and then decide to practice it.
My family, every once in a while, it's usually on a Friday night because there's no school the next day, about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, I will intentionally set off the fire alarms in my house to see where my children are going to react. And if you're standing outside my house, you see kids flying out windows because they all know that that's their escape route.
The tragic events of September 11th motivated the members of the Manhattan Fifth Ward to be better prepared. Now, virtually every family has an emergency response plan and 72-hour kits.
We've done it through our enrichment nights. We continue to do follow-ups on it and do adaptations to it, and kind of brought in the stuff. Everyone kind of made them. We've got ours. It's more than a backpack because we got 3 little kids that can't wear theirs.
72-hour kits, I have it, and I always have it right next to the bed. So when something happens, I can just grab it.
We keep actually a camping lantern, you know, like the Coleman camping lantern next to our bed, so that in case something were to happen at nighttime, we have a lantern there. I keep one in a flashlight in my top dresser drawer. We keep our backpacks right at the front door, and they're inside the front hall closet so that they can just easily be taken and go.
We have all of our church documents and our journals and things like that closer to the door as opposed to placed in different closets throughout the house. And it makes it a lot easier in case there's another problem. We can just grab it and go.
So for that first 72 hours, you want to have things that the family will eat that don't require a lot of preparation, that maybe don't even require cooking, that you can eat cold if you had to. That's going to help you a long ways. You may not be in a position to grind too many pounds of wheat when you've evacuated your home.
When preparing 72-hour kits, there are some basic items that you'll want to include, such as water, food, and clothing. Of course, depending on where you live and your particular circumstances, there are a number of additional items you'll want to consider. Some people even have mini 72-hour kits for work, for their car, or even for their purse.
Every time I go out, even now, when I go out, my purse has miniature 72-hour kit. I have flashlight in there. Of course, cell phone I always have, and make sure that battery is on. And I have a kit of Band-Aids to ointment to everything in a little kit in my purse.
A lot of us have been fortunate enough not to have to rely on our food storage or 72-hour kits. We may even wonder, why should we have them at all? But the very nature of emergencies is that we don't know when or where they'll occur. And there's peace of mind in knowing that we're ready, just in case.
Whether it's wasted or not, we did obey the prophet. That's what counts, how obedient we are.
I think it's more important that we were prepared than that we had to use it. Also, it may be that we're not the ones that have to use it. It may be that someone else needs it, and we're able to offer it to someone else.
I could never imagine actually using a year's supply for a year. What type of disaster? The world must be at an end if that were the case. But I could imagine that our year's supply gets split 12 ways between 12 families and lasts for a month. So I think it's not only for ourselves that we are prepared, but so that we can help others.
Some people think, I get food storage and it's mine, and I hold on to it, and it will help me in an emergency. But actually, the opposite is true. Just as with all gifts that our Heavenly Father gives us, He gives them to us so that we can share and help and enrich other people's lives. Should food storage or should the way we prepare for emergencies be any different? Really, He helps us prepare so that we can help others of His children.
Understandably, preparedness is of great importance for members of the Manhattan Fifth Ward. Every family has taken steps to be more prepared should another emergency happen. But they have also gained a spiritual preparedness that has developed through the events of September 11th and its aftermath.
I think for everyone in my ward particularly, it ended up being an opportunity to exercise faith in the Lord. And when you exercise faith, it's always rewarded and strengthens your faith. And what was such a tragic, heartfelt, just despicable event that was so heinous, so much good came from it. It's almost like you feel tighter as a family, as a ward, because you've shared those experiences and you've exercised the faith together and come to those questionings and shared that group process almost of mourning and coming to resolution and having your prayers be answered and the Spirit comfort you and help you to make sense of something that doesn't make sense.
Now, to be ready for an emergency, we don't need to go through life thinking a tragedy is just around the corner. We just need to take steps to be prepared. And remember, what's important is that every day we do the small things, the essentials, that add up to a balanced and more fulfilling life. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Living Essentials. For additional information on this and other episodes of Living Essentials, or for a copy of the program, visit us online at byubroadcasting.org/Living Essentials. There you'll find materials full of helpful hints that will enrich and simplify your everyday life.
Programming on BYU television is made possible by contributing viewers and by... And so there has to be an order of importance. Otherwise, and then you can designate the person to do each thing. To each other in the doorway. With a degree of grace.
You've mentioned some very important documents. The very top priority again, the vital documents to make sure that you get out first would be what?
Well, things like your home, your mortgage, your deed, copies of legal papers, your family trust, and a passport, things of that kind, and some cash money in reasonable denominations that are easily spent.
You know, when the fires were raging in Southern California, my brother had to be forced to evacuate his home within just an hour, and they had just enough time to remember the laptop and the camera. What other things might be on a lower tier priority, but still might be very, very important for you to take out of the home?
Well, you know, each person has kind of their own hierarchy of importance. For me, my cameras are important. They're somewhere down that list. They're not going to be as important, maybe, as those documents. For my wife, it might be, some favorite albums, family albums and so forth that are going to be important. And so you kind of have this hierarchy of lists that comes to mind when you sit down and talk about it.
Now, you mentioned that it might be difficult for us to get that garage door open and get our car out. But you say the next step in disaster planning actually has a lot more to do with what you put inside the car. So what should we do to outfit that vehicle?
Well, if people need a 72-hour kit, and by the way, those 72-hour kits need to be kept where people know where they are at and where you can grab them in a hurry. Then why not have your car having a 72-hour kit too? What would happen if that car was your only device of safety when something goes wrong? And that's the thing that's going to get you away. Make certain that you keep your gas tank at least half full in your vehicles. Make sure that you have in the storage space in the vehicle a blanket, an old sleeping bag, some water supply, particularly in the hot weather months, something to stay warm with, maybe even a hammer that you can break through a window with if you get into a flash flood situation and need to get out of that vehicle. You can kind of think this thing through and have everybody come up with an idea.
People are more and more becoming more reliant on their cell phones in daily use, but you say when you outfit that car, one thing you want to have is a cell phone, and you say, don't worry, it's not like we have to pay a monthly fee for that one cell phone that is in a car. So how does that cell phone in a disaster work for us if it's kept in the trunk or wherever it may be, a glove compartment?
Right. If you have an older cell phone, it may not be one that's active. You haven't had it activated, but there's nothing wrong with it. It still has a battery supply, which you can keep charged. You can stick that in the glove compartment or another handy place in the car. It means that you're going to have to think about it once in a while to make sure that it's charged, but at least you'll be able to call 911 with one of those phones.
I have a question, too, because we talked about how the tank needs to be half full. You probably need a hammer. You need to have maybe some 72-hour kit. I keep thinking as a mom, where am I going to put this so I can still get get my groceries in the trunk? How much space do we need to kind of allocate for disaster outfitting of our car? How much space do you think it would take?
You really don't need a lot of space, but you need to think about, for instance, the hammer for breaking out of the car. I have that in a pocket behind the passenger seat, so that I can grab it from my position if I'm the driver. If it's in the trunk, it's not going to help me. On the other hand, the shovel for helping me deal with a weather situation, that can be in the trunk. It can be slid up against the side wall of the trunk, doesn't take up much space, and you can take your blanket and you can wrap that around a container of water or some of the other things that you want, a little food supply. Doesn't have to take up very much space. Gives you a lot of peace of mind.
Well, and you talk about peace of mind. I think a lot of people try to think of their home as the most comfortable place for their family, the safest place. And interestingly enough, that ends up being step number 8 in a disaster plan. But I think you have other connotations other than just home sweet home when you talk about making sure that your home is safe and comfortable. Give us the details on that, Al.
Yeah, your home really needs to be kind of a supermarket, a clinic, a place where you can go to get things fixed and where people know where things are. It ought to be a place where people want to be more than any other place. And as we plan for preparedness, it also gives us an opportunity to strengthen and fortify our home in the minds of all those people who live there and come there. Not just our food supply, but all the things that make us comfortable.
Well, I keep thinking about that. You mentioned that if we have a shelter in our home, it needs to be sealed off to make sure, like, for example, there is something toxic in the air. We didn't want that to come in. But you say in other cases, in other disaster scenarios, we might actually need extra ventilation in our home. How do we prepare for that?
Well, let's assume that you have an emergency that comes along in the wintertime. You lose your electric power. You need heat. People need to stay warm. One more reason for having a confined space: it's easier to heat a small area than a large one, easier to cut off outside cold air in that instance, or in the summertime, the opposite, the easier to keep it cooled. But in the event that you have to do something long-term, like bring in a kerosene-powered lamp, something like that, you really need to understand the importance of the fact that that's burning oxygen at the same time that it's producing carbon monoxide and other harmful things. Ventilation becomes very important. A lot of people haven't had that much experience with artificial heat, and so they need to have in mind the importance of having a fire extinguisher, a person who's especially on watch, and cross ventilation.
You know, you mentioned the fact that probably people haven't experienced what it's like to have to heat by kerosene, but almost all of us have at some point had the power go out in our house. And this might be in a disaster something that we endure for a period of time. What do we do to make our home safe and comfortable and prepared for a power outage that will last for some time?
One of the most important things is lighting, and emergency lighting. There are some excellent lanterns that are built today that work on battery power. They're very, very safe. You can tip them over and they're not going to cause a fire. They're good for 6 or 8 hours or 12 hours of use on battery power. So that's my number one thing. I'm going to go to that battery-powered lantern. I can read by it. I can move from room to room safely. If I have to go to a kerosene or propane-powered lantern, the propane's probably my second choice. It's less dangerous. It's less volatile to deal with than a kerosene-powered lamp. But all those things need to be part of the list that we're looking at and considering what works best for our family. You know, in all of this, there's not such a thing as a one-size-fits-all plan. And that's why it's important for us to do it as a family.
When you say one size fits all or doesn't fit all, I know that generators now come in different sizes, and all we need is another big disaster, and people are out buying it. How important is it to, or when would we use, for example, a gas-powered generator?
I have 2 generators, one of which I had because I used it when I built my home. But I have a portable generator, which I love. I've had it for years. I can pick it up and move it from one place to another. It'll give me power for 12, 14 hours on one filling of gasoline. That brings along the problem of fuel storage. You have to think your way through that. You don't want to store fuel storage, you don't want to store fuel where it might endanger your home, the place where you live. In operating a generator, you have to make sure that it's outdoors, that you don't start up a generator in the house, or that you keep it away from a place like open windows or doors.
Okay, you say not in the house, and that brings up a safety issue. And so why would we have the generator outside versus inside?
Again, it uses oxygen that it's in the air, and it replaces that oxygen with carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide fumes, and it can kill people. We have people that die every year from the improper use of portable generators. So if you're going to use a generator, study it up, plan how you're going to do it, and practice a little bit.
I love this next step, step 9, and I know that pet owners are going to appreciate this one as well, and some of us might even think it should have been higher up on the steps, but indeed, we got to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of our pets and our livestock, and that's what you have as step 9 in our disaster plan. So how do we prepare to take care of Fido and the kitty cats, and maybe even we'll talk about livestock as well, but let's first talk about our pets.
Well, pets are like another member of the family. And we've had many examples of that recently as we've gone through some of the fires. People really love their pets. They're not always going to be able to take their pets with them. If you're going to go into a shelter situation, and the Red Cross has the mission of maintaining shelters, they don't like pets. They don't have facilities to deal with them. And so it's important for us to have a plan. What do we do if we have to leave the pets at home alone for a period of time? Do we have some gravity feeders that we don't have to tend, so that the food kind of gravitates down to where they can eat it themselves?
Okay. Those are those like containers that will hold a lot of water, for example, or food, and then as the pet consumes it, it releases a little bit more. So that might cover them for 72 hours.
Right.
Okay.
And if we do have to leave our pets alone at home, perhaps it's a wildfire situation, we ought to leave some kind of a note where it can be seen by emergency responders in the front window or on our door to let them know that there is a pet in this home or there are 2 pets in this home that we have been forced to leave behind. The other thing you might do is have a plan with friends, neighbors, other members of your extended family who might want to do some pet sitting for you in an emergency. One more reason why your plan needs to have this contingency. Where do we go? Whom do we notify? Who are some of the other resources outside our own neighborhood who can be a part of our plan?
I can't help but think that I want to add also that an ID tag on that animal would be very important, because sometimes when a large disaster happens, we have dogs and cats spread around the city. We'd like to take them home, but we don't know to whom they belong.
One of the responsibilities that I had in one of the Florida hurricanes was that of animal control. On a typical day in this one community, we had 2,000 pets that became ours to deal with. That is the emergency responders, the emergency managers. It's a gigantic task for whoever is taking it on, whether it's your local emergency management, your local animal control people, but they're going to end up with animals, everything from little woolly bears to alligators you might have to deal with. We can become part of the solution rather than the problem if we have seen to it that our pets have a plan.
Well, step number 10 has to do with money, and everybody usually takes a deep sigh with this, but you say it's very important to plan for a financial contingency. So financial contingency plan, step number 10. What is that?
It can mean a lot of things. For one thing, that plastic money that we're so accustomed to using, pulling out of our wallet and using in place of regular cash, doesn't work in a disaster situation. You don't have card readers that work. Cash becomes very important, real cash, the old-fashioned kind. So in our supplies, first of all, on a short-term basis, we need to have some cash set aside to see us through a quick emergency. Long-term, I think it makes sense for all of us as families to look at what we would do if, for instance, we were cut off from our cash supply for 3 months. Now, it maybe isn't possible to put away 3 months' worth of cash, but we can maybe down pay some of our bills in advance. Maybe we can create a special account that we add to every month. It will help to see us through that kind of emergency. Because of all the things that can go wrong, the most likely one is an interruption in our cash flow. Sooner or later, that will happen to most families, and it ought to be part of our contingency planning.
And you ask anyone who's been through it, it's a disaster, and they certainly want to prepare for that. The next step, I think, is so important for us to understand, and this is actually every day we have in our mind our health and taking care of ourselves. We might have certain medication that controls blood pressure, diabetes, whatever it may be. And so it's vital that we understand that the next step is making sure that we have what we need when it comes to medicine and our medical plans. Talk about that.
The first person that we're responsible for is ourselves. And if we have disregarded our health, the rest of our plan might go for nothing. When there's a power outage, when we don't have electricity at our disposal, when we have to leave home, when any of these things take place, it puts a special crisis on us when it comes to our life-saving type supplies. I've seen 18-hour power outages here where we discovered only afterwards that there was this elderly person in their home who didn't have an extra cylinder of oxygen, and their oxygen generator wouldn't operate without electricity. Nobody knew about it. One of the reasons why we should be responsible for each other is when the going really gets tough, law enforcement, our EMT people, our ambulance drivers, they're all going to be busy. They may not be the ones that are the first ones to come to our aid. It's probably going to be a next-door neighbor who really bails us out in a time of need. So we need to include them in our plan. Think of somebody that we can help that can be a part of our contingency plan.
All right, and that's actually officially your next step. Is steps 1 through 11, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our family, taking care of our pets, and then looking around the neighborhood. Who are the type of individuals we might find who are the most needy and can't really do steps 1 through 11? They can plan for it, but may not be able to implement the plan. Give us some examples.
Well, it happens all the time. In fact, 98% of the lives that are saved each year in an emergency situation are people whose lives were saved by somebody nearby, somebody who took responsibility for them, somebody who checked in to make sure that they were okay. People can freeze to death very quickly without some outside help. People can lose consciousness and not be able to care for themselves. All of these things contemplate the importance of us caring for and taking care of each other.
And I think all of us would probably take just a minute or two and think, there's Mrs. Jones down the street, there's a little one around there. And I think that's what's so beautiful about society, is that when you do have a major event like this, people really do lose a sense of selfishness and start thinking so much about others, and it seems to really bring people together. We've talked about these 12 different steps in order to have a disaster plan. We have a few minutes now that we could also kind of talk about implementation. So if we were now inspired by what we've talked about today and we wanted to begin implementing this, what would be some of the first things that you would recommend that we do?
One of the first things is to do an inventory. Take a look at what you own, what is in your home that could be helpful to you in an emergency. Write them down. Make a list of them. Every flashlight you have, every spare radio, its working condition. Where are the tools that we might need? How ready is our automobile to help us in an evacuation? What are the steps that we can go through to make ourselves more ready, to increase our state of readiness? And all of that ought to be part of the way we approach it. Then, you know, at different times of the year when we're gift giving, think of the things that we could use as individuals and families that not only would be fun to own, but would add to our state of readiness. Gifts and so forth that can add to that supply, that list of resources that are ours to make use of, and then to practice using them and make sure everybody in our home base, whether it's at our work, in our school, or in our home, knows how to respond and how to use those things.
And it actually summarizes so beautifully, because one of the greatest gifts we can give to ourselves is the gift of peace of mind. And by having those 12 steps nailed down and then begin the implementation, we can know we're ready for whatever else is going to be happening out there. And then when you talk about generous gift giving to others, is to give them the resources they need so they can have that same peace of mind.
Excellent. Right on.
Well, Al, it has been such a pleasure to discuss these steps and to discuss what we need to know.